Richard Holden is with us for the government this morning. How are you?
Morning, Kay. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. Are you going up to conference?
I am going up to conference.
Are you going on the train?
No, I'll be driving, sadly.
Yeah, not many of us can because, of course, there's another strike. What are you guys doing about it?
There is. Look, we've made a really big offer to the unions already. The average
When was the last time you spoke to them?
It's not my part of the department.
As a government?
The government, I'm sure, is speaking, and other parts of the government will be speaking to the unions all the time. What we've seen is an offer on the table to raise the average salary before benefits, before pension, before overtime for a train driver from £60,000 a year to £65,000. A lot of your viewers will think that's a pretty generous deal at the moment and will think it's a generous offer for the future. I certainly do think it is. From my sectors as well, which I look after within the Department of Transport.
What would you say to the unions
like a very good deal.
Morning?
I'd say, think of the travelling public, think of the impact more broadly on rail, which is only really, still recovering from a COVID pandemic and different working patterns. Work with the operators and, accept what I think is a pretty reasonable offer for the average salary to move to £65,000 a year for a train driver, and before you're talking about overtime and things like that. I think that's a pretty decent offer on the ground, and I really hope that they do listen to people because the impact more broadly on the reputation of the train network is quite substantial, when there's constant strike action. And I think it makes people start to think differently about the travel choices that they're making.
Yeah, and how will that be impacted when you scrap HS2 up to Manchester?
Well, look, there's obviously an ongoing debate at the moment.
Why is there even a debate about it?
Because the reason is, Kay, because this is an enormously expensive transport project, and it's right that the government really kicks the tyres on any form of public spending project.
So you've not been on top of it up until now?
No, I think that's fair. I think any form of public spending project with us that high and over such a long period of time.
How long have you been in power? Well,
no, you're absolutely right, but this is a project which is going on for decades, and as we look at it, you've seen things like, for example, the cost of raw materials with the pandemic go up hugely. You've seen massive inflation, particularly in the construction sector, sometimes double the actual rate of inflation we see in the shops, for example. So it's right that when
impacts all of us who are doing home improvements or whatever. It doesn't mean we can scrap them halfway through.
No, you're absolutely right, but you have to look at the rescoping, as the government's already looked at, of the scheme.
What does that mean?
That means changing the time frame over which you deliver it in order to.
So you're not going to scrap it, but you're just going to kick it.
Well, as I said, the Prime Minister and Chancellor are looking at this at the moment.
You're not going to announce it, obviously, with going up to Manchester. You're not going to announce it this week, but maybe next week.
Well, I was in Manchester earlier this week.
It's a good week to bury bad news next week because Labour's conference is.
I was in Manchester earlier this week with Andy Burnham, looking at over £1.1 billion that the government is putting in to work with him on a cross-party basis. Indeed, but actually a lot of people will also be interested in the local transport infrastructure, for example, in Greater Manchester.
Yeah, well, I'll speak to Andy Burnham about that, if I may. Let me ask you about this youngster that was stabbed in Croydon. What's the government going to do about it? It's getting out of hand.
It's absolutely outrageous that things like this have happened, and I really feel for the family and friends of the young lady involved, and this has apparently happened in front of all of her school friends as well. We've banned zombie knives. I think it was back in 2016. We've banned other knives which are similar back in 2019. It was only a few months ago the Prime Minister announced we're extending sentences for people caught illegally importing these horrific weapons. I think we're quadrupling the sentences available for that.
And yet still these kids are getting murdered.
I know, and it's absolutely horrendous. And I think actually, as we can legislate as much as we want, and we can make sentences harder. That's not going to bring this young 15-year-old girl back. I think what we have to do is see a real change, particularly in broader society, particularly amongst young people, to say, carrying knives, it's just not something that anybody should do in any way, shape, or form.
Do we need tougher legislation?
Well, we keep legislating for we're making sentencing harder, but we've banned these knives. These are being illegally imported. We're now making the sentencing for illegal importation stronger, and we've got more, 20,000 more police on the street than when I was elected back in 2020. Well, I think actually this requires us to have a broader conversation as a society about what young people are seeing and why they're behaving in this way. I think parents and us all, actually, if we see young people with knives or thinking about this sort of thing, we just need to be prepared to have really tough conversations and stop young people, going out there and actually, yes, informing the police if necessary, because it's absolutely what we don't want to see is more tragic cases like this. A young girl who's lost her life standing up for a friend. It's just absolutely abhorrent. And I'm just glad that the person who is alleged to have committed the offence has been caught very quickly.
Well, we don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens as far as that is concerned. And I'm not going to challenge you on the police numbers because I want to go on to ask you about the Mayor of London. But, we could debate that as well, as you well know. The Mayor of London, is he doing enough about kids on the streets of London?
Well, I want to see the Mayor fully focused on, crime and antisocial behaviour. I think there have been some distractions over the last few months for him, and I just want to ensure that...
What sort of distractions? Well,
I think you can talk about what's happening, the flip-flopping around ULEZ and things like that. I think what we should be focusing on is things which really affect people in the city, and the Mayor of London, as essentially the Police and Crime Commissioner for neighbourhood crime in London, should really be focused on that.
Do you think he's not focused?
I think if it was me, one of my main sole focuses at the moment would be very much on crime. We've seen some real issues in London, particularly with violent crime, particularly amongst young people. I don't want to see that getting out of control. I want to see those numbers coming down. And I think if I was the Mayor, that would be my sole focus at the moment on what we can do to reduce crime in our city. And it's not just around knife crime either. We've seen other issues, such as some of the sexual violence as well, which has been a real issue in London over the last few years, and actually an issue within inside the police as well. I think the new police commissioner is doing a good job at trying to turn that around, but I think what he requires is political support in order to do that, and political focus. And I think that if I was the Mayor, that's what I'd be focused on at the moment.
OK, what would you do about the Home Secretary's speech? Are you fully behind what she's been saying?
Well, I think if you look at what the government's doing at the moment, we've got the Rwanda scheme going through, which...
no, but saying that people are pretending to be gay is just despicable.
Look, we've got the Rwanda scheme going through, and that's all about the ECHR, which is around the base of the comments. We're doing that Rwanda scheme. The challenge is within the ECHR. That's what we're trying to ensure that we operate still within that. But I think when you're talking about the Refugee Convention more generally, it was passed before most of my grandparents could vote, and all my grandparents are now sadly passed on. That is a very long period of time for something which was brought in really before the advent of modern air travel. Even I think it's right that we obviously have a debate and look at these things over time as situations change and situations develop. The world population has almost trebled during that period, and it's right that as fundamental things shift over many decades, that we look at them and have conversations and think about whether they're right as they are for now.
OK, let's end where we started. Transport, buses.
Yes.
Tell me more.
So, OK, so we've announced since the start of the pandemic, we've put over £3.5 billion into support our bus networks. Today, we're announcing next year's funding, so to give some certainty to councils and operators for 64 local authorities, providing an extra £80 million, which is to help their support rural networks particularly, but also just provide basic connectivity right across the country. This is on top of the bus service operator grant, which we've already announced, another around £65 million for next year, and on top of the £2 fare cap, which we've had since the 1st of January, and which is going to be £2.50 for another year. Because whether it's supporting existing routes or trying to get people to think differently about bus and take that first bus journey.
On a bus?
I was literally on a bus in Nottingham last week.
Very good.
There you go.
Pass the test. I use the bus all the time with my Freedom Pass. I know I do.
Unbelievable.
There you go.
Unbelievable.
Just under the wire. It's good to see you, Minister. Thanks very much indeed.